Dexter New Blood has arrived to remind us all why we fell in love with Michael C. Hall's lovable serial killer in the first place. This new series is a love note to the original, highlighting everything the original did so well with Easter eggs, sneaky reveals, and cameos I bet you missed. Last we saw Dexter Morgan, he was a lumberjack in Oregon. Literally no one liked this. For the writers of New Blood though, they hated it for completely different reasons. They made an incredibly good point that becoming a lumberjack would be the last job Dexter would ever want. As anyone who watched the show knows, Dexter's origin includes chainsaws in a way that I can't really discuss on YouTube. Needless to say, having a job where he's both trying to stay non-violent while being surrounded every day by chainsaws is just something that doesn't make any sense for Dexter.
It's called commerce, I'm into it.
Right.
That's why he was moved to Iron Lake at a sporting goods store. Dexter New Blood feels more like Dexter than many of the last few seasons of Dexter do. It effortlessly recaptures the charm of the first season as well as the gritty stakes. That's probably because Clyde Phillips was there for the first 4 seasons of the show. He bowed out after the Trinity arc only to come back for New Blood, to end things how they should be ended.
Some of the fans had some problems with the finale of the original run of Dexter.
Yes.
I don't know if you read about that.
I've heard about it.
You've heard about that, okay.
Then he put 2 of his books in the episode where Harrison makes a new and potentially violent threat. Anyone familiar with the plots of Unthinkable and Fall from Grace probably saw the twist where Ethan was making violent plans for his classmates coming, even though Harrison stopped that twist from actually happening. The one thing that I was immediately disappointed with was the opening titles. The original titles were iconic, so not getting to see a new version of them with Dexter's new morning routine hurt me. Then I saw what they were doing episode by episode and I got it. Each episode shows more and more blood, spreading through the melting ice of the Dexter New Blood titles. Funnily though, this exact same opening credits running joke was used for Invincible earlier in 2021. Though Invincible didn't have new closing credits each episode that corresponded to something that happened in the episode like Dexter New Blood does. While the old opening titles where we see Dexter's violent habits coming through as he does everyday things like eating breakfast weren't repeated in the new series, that doesn't mean that there aren't references. Almost every episode we see Dexter eating breakfast with the same kind of violent gusto he does in the original show's opening. Not only that, but it appears like this is genetic. Dexter watches Harrison wolfing down food and jokes that he even eats like me. This was also a big hint that Harrison had a lot more in common with his father than Dex originally thought.
Huh. Like father, like son.
Dexter Morgan's public persona is a mirror of all the things he sees normal people doing all the time. As a wolf in sheep's clothing, he has to pretend to be a goofy, affable guy to make it seem like he's the last person who could be the Bay Harbor butcher. His go-to way of gaining people's trust is to show up with donuts. I mean, who doesn't like the guy who brings donuts? Well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. In the first episode, he's shown delivering pastries to his coworker. Of course, that's not the only old hobby he brings back in the first episode. New Blood is full of cameos from the first series. I mean, it couldn't really serve as a good love letter to the original series if it didn't pay homage to the show's amazing B players. Even actors who had characters lose their lives in the first series showed up for a new one. One of those actors snuck in with a quick cameo no one saw coming. If you listen really closely to the truck driver who drops Harrison off, you'll notice that it's Doakes actor Eric King who perished in season 2. He says Iron Lake's about 2 miles that way, my man, before leaving without ever showing his face.
Iron Lake's about 2 miles that way, my man.
I just wish they could have included his famous surprise line in there somehow.
Surprise, mother.
James Remar was a constant presence throughout the entire first series. He served as the ghost of Harry Morgan, who trained Dexter in the code he used to ethically go through his violent habits. Well, ethically may not be the right word. Everyone was likely surprised to see that Harry's face doesn't appear to Dexter anymore. Well, it turns out that James Remar moved on from mentoring one type of vigilante for another. He was serving as Gamby in the Black Lightning TV show at that time and thus couldn't make it for filming. Luckily, this worked out to our advantage. You just can't do a Dexter series without Jennifer Carpenter's Debra Morgan. Dexter's foul-mouthed detective sister was one of the best parts of the original show. In fact, one of the problems fans had with the end of the series is how pitiful her demise was, despite the fact that she'd been so cool. Well, New Blood brought her back as a replacement for Harry's ghost. Only you can't bring back an actress like Jennifer Carpenter just to be a voice of reason in Dexter's head. They made sure to portray Debra as a more vengeful ghost who gets violent with Dexter, so Carpenter had a role that was worthy of her talent. While he didn't have a choice in his original name, looking back on it, Dexter Morgan just sounds like the name of a vicious criminal, doesn't it? It's not quite as innocuous as I think he needs. Jim Lindsay, however, sounds like a guy who has never even jaywalked in his life. This is also a reference to the original book series author Jeff Lindsay. They may have left the Dexter novels behind a long time ago, but at least they threw in a cheeky reference to make sure we all remembered who had this idea in the first place.
Lindsay, huh?
Jim. Is there a problem, officer?
Harrison arriving unexpectedly at Dexter's door ended up being the best twist in the series. Fatherhood always heightened Dexter's struggles with trying to be a normal human and his dark passenger. While I'm certainly glad that we get to see a Harrison who is almost an adult, it really doesn't make any sense.
You bet.
Harrison Morgan was born in 2009. Calendars in the show reveal that it does take place in December of 2021. If the show is set in 2021, that means Harrison should be like 12 years old. They thought we wouldn't notice, but we did. Not that I'm mad about it. When Dexter decided to finally tell Harrison about his other persona, he did what any vigilante father talking to his would-be sidekick son would do. He basically cast himself as Batman.
So you're kind of like Batman or something.
That included telling him the story of how he once took out an evil clown. If this wasn't subtle enough, the show went over the top to make sure we all got what they were going for. Mr. Wiggles may be an original character, but they used the exact same clown makeup as Joaquin Phoenix's Arthur Fleck from Joker. Wiggles even had the same sequence where he laughed to himself while applying makeup with a brush. One of the biggest surprises in the show had nothing to do with any dark twists or dangerous moments.
What?
It was when David Zayas as Angel Batista showed up at a conference in New York City. He was there talking about all of the crazy shenanigans Miami Metro got up to in the original show. While it was mostly just a fun cameo for the fans, it did close out some questions about his life. Number 1, it seems like Batista is still very much single from the way he was flirting.
I have a boyfriend.
Number 2, he definitely assumed Dexter was a goner in that hurricane. Number 3, it really doesn't look like he believes Dexter was actually the Bay Harbor Butcher after all. Honestly, he barely seems to remember Dexter at all. I loved C.S. Lewis as Vince Masuka in the OG series. Miami Metro was full of so many self-conscious cops who were caught up in their own drama. That's why it was so great to have such a silly forensics expert to pop in every once in a while with a dirty joke. Unfortunately, Masuka didn't make it into the spin-off, but there is a reference to a running joke. While finding out about Dexter's past, Angela discovered that Dexter Morgan was a lead forensics expert. Well, Masuka was actually the leading expert, even though Dexter often stole the limelight. Apparently, that's true even after Dexter got seemingly swept away by a hurricane. The Trinity Killer arc is often regarded as the best arc in the series. That is undoubtedly because of legendary funny man John Lithgow from Third Rock from the Sun, or Harry and the Henderson. He hit back against this dorky old man image most had of him by embodying the most terrifying villain the series had ever seen. Thankfully, Lithgow came for a creepy flashback that showed him talking to little baby Harrison, right after the infamous bathtub scene with Rita. Well, apparently this was a big deal on the production. Everyone wanted to see Lithgow there, and apparently the new guys were starstruck by him. I mean, I would be too. I'm just gonna say that Clancy Brown's Kurt Caldwell is the best Dexter villain since Trinity. That is mostly because Brown is well known for being terrifying. He's played a ton of villains ranging from Lex Luthor in the Superman animated series, the Kurgan in Highlander, and Berg from The Mandalorian. It seems like New Blood references Brown's most successful silly role though. If you didn't already know, he's been the voice of Mr. Krabs since 1999.
There's gonna be a few changes around here.
Like Krabs, Caldwell also owns a burger joint, which seems like a cheeky reference to his SpongeBob past. Hopefully that's all they have in common. One of the craziest things about the original ending of Dexter is that we see Dex driving into Hurricane Laura, only to be alive and well in Oregon a scene later. Well, New Blood does explain this, a little bit. When Dexter is explaining how he came to be Jim Lindsay, he basically says that he drove into that hurricane and then magically woke up ashore and alive. With this second chance at life, he decided to try his hand at putting his dark passenger aside in Oregon. Though really they saved him so that they could maybe bring him back one day, I think it all worked out in the end, don't you?
I couldn't be Dexter Morgan anymore. He was cursed. And I wasn't going to pass that curse down to Harrison.
I don't know about you, but I think Julia Jones has had a star-making turn as Angela Bishop in New Blood. She's had a ton of minor roles in Hollywood. She's been in The Twilight Saga, Westworld, Wind River, among many other hits. She didn't get any real attention until she almost made Pedro Pascal give up his armor in The Mandalorian. This led to her booking New Blood. I wouldn't be surprised if she was starring in another Showtime series in the near future. The first show notably showed off how hot and sunny the city of Miami was in pretty much every single scene. So it's really a shock to the system when you start New Blood and see Dexter Morgan no longer in a short-sleeve shirt, but running through thick snow. The show drives into this contrast as hard as the original did Miami's sunshine. If you really look closely, you'll see that practically every scene exemplifies how cold the area is. I mean, Dexter could have lived in a normal house. Instead, they gave him a wooden cabin with a fireplace that looks like it barely heats the place. This really pushes the idea that this isn't your normal Dexter anymore.
I don't know who you're talking about.
One of the big parts of New Blood is Molly Park. She provides vital pieces of exposition that the new characters and possibly the newer fans need to understand some of the events of the first show. That would be the MFK, because YouTube needs me to abbreviate it, podcast. Well, if you love this podcast, you're lucky to find that this podcast actually has a few short episodes you can listen to. You're welcome. Dexter New Blood is not very subtle about what parts of the first series it likes. The show frequently references Trinity in the events of the first 4 seasons. It has several notable absences. You'll notice that there are no episodes of the podcast focused on the Doomsday Killer, the Brain Surgeon, or Jordan Chase. It's clear that this show has no interest in looking at some of the show's lesser-loved seasons. Not that I blame it. There's just something about Michael Cyril Creighton that draws him into creepy shows like New Blood and Only Murders in the Building. Both shows are about bloody mysteries that are covered in podcasts. Funnily enough, there's another accidental tie between his 2021 hit characters. Both seem to be cat people. Both Fred Jr. and Howard love cats. Howard was crestfallen over losing his cat in episode 1 of the Steve Martin Show, while Fred Jr. was crestfallen that his husband made him adopt a dog. Some Easter eggs are just hysterical accidents. The original Dexter TV show almost featured a famous MCU actor. That would be none other than Clint Barton himself, Jeremy Renner. As the star known for playing Jeffrey Dahmer, Renner was on the shortlist for casting the first season. He didn't make the cut for Dexter himself, but he was offered a different role. He was the first choice for Dex's brother, the Ice Truck Killer. Unfortunately, Renner had another commitment with 28 weeks later. That, combined with his reluctance for being known as the creepy guy, made him dodge Dexter's table. Maybe if they'd offered him the lead role, he'd be in New Blood instead of Hawkeye. So how do you approach writing a brand new Dexter series? Well, the first show was beloved. Its finale is never missed on any list of worst series finales of all time. In fact, it's almost always in the top 3 worst ever made. So this time they decided to fix that exact issue. The writers apparently started with how they wanted the series to end and worked backwards from there. The producers have promised that this will be a much more shocking and memorable finale that the series deserves. Well, you'll just have to be the one to decide. New Blood certainly has a fresh new look. Despite that, it clearly has the same kind of style the first few seasons did. That's because director Marco Siega is back from the original series. Since working on Dexter the first time, he's worked on similar shows like You and The Following, which has clearly honed his skills in the genre. So far, they have told us that New Blood is a mini-series. With how successful and universally beloved the spin-off has been, rumor has it that a second season may actually be a possibility.
Life is short, dude.
Of course, all of this depends on how people like the new ending, and who's still standing once the bloody snow clears. Now that Dexter has had his redemption at last, is there any way How I Met Your Mother and Game of Thrones could get redemptions next?
This is a lot.